Hello and welcome to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at University Bookstore is author Elizabeth Strout. Liz, thank you so much for flying up from San Francisco early this morning. And
it's a pleasure to be here. It really, really is. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I have to say that I have been a huge fan of your books since Amy and Isabel.
Oh, nice.
And I just still remember when I read Amy and Isabel, and I remember I have a notebook of all the things that I copy from lines and paragraphs and poems, and
exactly.
And I remember still how just blown away I was by your writing.
Oh.
It was.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
And then the next thing that I just wanted to sort of say, so people won't think I'm unprejudiced, is, and I'm not even, I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this publicly, but I was one of the judges, the Pulitzer judges, when Olive Kitteridge won.
Oh my goodness.
And
wow.
Just selfishly.
I had no idea. I never knew he was a judge.
It was,
wow.
Your book was my favorite that year.
Oh, that's very interesting to hear.
Yes.
Wow, thank you.
So
I'm so happy to be able to thank you in person.
So it's really a delight to have you here.
Well, yeah, it's a delight for me to
yeah, and I have many questions on many different issues to ask you. So your new book, My Name is Lucy Barton, seemed to me to be, when I read it, both like and very unlike your other books. So, like in the themes, I think, generally. So let's put that aside and talk about that later. But what was so interesting to me was the difference in the writing style. Yeah. So could you talk about that?
Yes, the voice, well, first of all, it's first person. And it's my only piece of work done in first person. And that was frightening for me, frankly. I was nervous about it, and I kind of didn't want to do it. And I started it the way I start, anything new or even not new or whatever. I write little sketches or pieces of scenes. I write by hand, and I have a huge desk, and I just move them around. That's what I do for many, many weeks at a time. And Lucy and her mother were sketched, in this hospital room, and I just didn't really pay that much attention to it. And I think it was because it was first person. And then I tried it third person. It's not a third person. And I realized it's her voice, and I have to listen to her voice. And so after a while, I understand from my own experience, my many years of writing, that when the piece of paper comes back around and back around, I have to pay attention to it. And so I picked it up, and I thought, okay, Lucy, here we go. We'll try this. And her voice is very distinct. I think it's a particular sound to the voice, and then the style of the book unfolds from that. So I agree, it's different. It's a distillation almost.
It's not that your writing ever has been has ever appeared to me to be flowery or adjectival. But this is much sparer.
It is.
And was that due to the story? To kind of parallel the story?
I think I'm so character driven that everything for me always starts with character. Even if it's the way the sun is coming through the bottom of the doorway, it will move something in me that makes me think of a person.
Yes.
So I'm always thinking of a character. And so I think that Lucy and her voice, they became the story. And it wasn't so much a conscious choice as much as an understanding as I unfolded it, that this would be, it had to be, told in this particular way.
When you had all those pieces of paper and you were trying to figure out in what order, were there scenes that you knew you wanted to include, or that you felt needed to be included, that were harder for you to write than others?
That's a good question. I don't know. There's such a long period of messiness, and it really is very messy, and it's really pretty long. So it's hard for me to remember exactly what was happening, you know, during those times. And I'll write a scene or even part of a scene and immediately rewrite it. Immediately rewrite it because I think, well, that doesn't sound right. Even if it gets thrown out,
Right.
I understand I'm still always looking for the sound.
Right.
Because the sound, even in all my books, the sound of the narrative voice is what will convey the story to you.
Right. Yes.
And so, so were there scenes that were more difficult? I don't remember that there were particular scenes that were more difficult to write. It was all a bit of a, it was a strange experience, actually.
Was it? It sounds like no novel writing, it seems to me, could be described as exactly easy.
Yeah.
But it
Right.
sounds like it was more seamless, maybe, than your other novels.
Right. It was different. It was just different. The whole, from the beginning to the end of it, the whole process was different. I mean, every novel is different,
Right.
because they're different.
Right.
But this, I was very aware the whole time that something was happening that was outside my comfort zone, maybe even. And I never write from beginning to end anything, ever, even a story. So that was the same. That was, you know, and the
Right.
mess
Right.
was the same.
Right.
But I was aware of it having its own particularity.
By this time in your career, which has seen so many
Yeah, changes.
wonderful but high points,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah.
you've been lauded for your books. Did you feel nervous about My Name is Lucy Barton in a
did.
way you didn't maybe about some of the others?
I did feel nervous. Yes, I did. And I think that I felt nervous about it because it was first person, and I had never taken that on. And I worry, you know, I love different points of views. My omniscient characters, my omniscient narrators, they always slide around from one
Right.
head to another. And I just am so interested in people's different point of view
Right.
in the same room, and so that's very interesting to me. And with a first-person narrator, there's only going to be that one
Right.
point of view,
You've narrowed it down.
that made me nervous, and and I worried about perhaps the reader feeling claustrophobic, because I think sometimes a first-person narration, a reader can feel like I'm stuck in this head and I
Right.
don't want to be,
Right.
and I didn't want that. And I think as I realized that the scenes with the mother and the daughter in the hospital, that it was a retrospective type thing going on, that would help distance the reader
Right.
from being too clackety-clack in the head.
Right. Was that a conscious decision? I mean, or was that just a realization, that sort of sense that, oh yeah, these are retrospective scenes? Did you know you were going to do that? Does that make sense, my question?
Yes, the question does make sense. And no, I didn't know. I did not know. I just kept doing these different scenes. And I have one reader, and I've had her for 32 years. And this book is dedicated to her.
Really?
And I gave her a very early draft of maybe part of the beginning, what was ended up being at the beginning. And she was the one who said to me, it's retrospective, it's okay.
Oh.
So I should give her credit for that. And then I realized, oh, she's right, of course. Okay, so that will help with that.
I think one of the reasons that I really love your writing, your books so much, and that I think they're so terrific for book clubs,
Yeah.
is because you don't say everything.
Yeah.
You know, and
Right, particularly in Lucy.
particularly in
Yeah.
Lucy. And I always have described it to my students and to people that I'm talking about it, that when you're in a book group, what you're discussing is all the white space on the page.
Exactly.
You're discussing
Exactly.
what the author hasn't said.
Exactly.
And that's where that collaboration
Exactly. Between the reader and the
Right.
writer. And it's always,
Right.
always a collaboration, and
Right.
it should be.
Yes.
And I'm always writing for a reader, an ideal reader. I have, you know, an ideal
Yeah.
reader in mind.
Right.
And but I've always said, and I really believe, every reader brings their own story
Yes.
to whatever they're reading. And
Right.
so, you know, every book is different
Yes.
for every person who reads it.
Yeah.
But this is particularly, I think, porous in a way. So there will be more space
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
reader
Yeah.
to enter.
Yes, and to sort of what's the current word, unpack the different
right, exactly,
the different
right,
things.
and have their own experiences helping them decide what
Yes.
Lucy's about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I started Olive Kitteridge, when it was published, or I guess I think I read an early a galley.
Yeah.
I read the first chapter, and I was so upset, and so I was angry at Olive for not being a nice person. And when I look back on that, I think it's because I was afraid that I recognized myself in Olive, you know, and that it was so painful.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, not
totally,
of course, but you know what I mean.
Right, I do. Yeah.
And I had to put the book down because I couldn't face
she's not at her best in that first.
No, she's not. She's not.
She's certainly,
but
you know, she's not at her best quite a bit. But but in that first story, she's pretty hard to take. You're exactly right.
She's pretty mean to her husband.
Yes, she is. You're exactly right.
Yeah. But I just recently realized that was what was so upsetting to me.
Well, that's an honest reaction, I think.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens with, I think that's the mysterious alchemy that goes on when you're reading, is that you don't know what about a book is going to strike you in any particular way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Which is why they're so great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then of course I went back and you know, went through the first chapter again, and then went on to the other ones, and you know, it's just wonderful.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I understand. I mean, I certainly understand that response. To her. Was
it difficult to write about somebody who is such a difficult woman?
You know, here's what I remember about writing Olive, and it wasn't difficult to write about her. I mean, except for the fact that it was hard to write about her, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yes.
But I do remember particularly one evening when I looked back over what I had done during the day, and I remember thinking, oh, I don't know, you know, she's really badly behaved, and I remember specifically thinking to myself, you let her be her. Just let her be Olive. And that was very helpful for me to have that little tiny recognition private in my little head at that time. And then I realized, okay, she's just going to be Olive. And then, so that was the one time I remember thinking, But I also understood that she would be a lot for the reader to take. I mean, she was a lot for me to take. I mean, she's Olive. She's a lot to take. And I understood. I thought, you know, I don't want her on every page. I don't want a frontal assault of Olive. You know,
taking on the world. Yeah.
Exactly. And I understood right away that I would have these other stories interspersed, partly to give the reader a break from Olive, and also because the community that she lives in is so interesting to me, and everybody has their image of Olive, and yet then every so often we get to be inside Olive and realize that they're kind of wrong in many ways, as we always are.
Exactly.
We're always wrong. We think we know our neighbor. We don't know our neighbor.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That's, I think, one of the interesting things.
Yeah.
One of the themes that I think runs through your books, although I'm not sure Abide With Me fits in this theme, is the whole sort of mother-daughter conundrum, that mess of the mother-daughter relationship.
Right. Well, I guess you're right. What can I say? You're absolutely right. They're different mothers and they're different daughters.
Yes.
But it's obviously a relationship that interests me a lot. And I didn't particularly know it until I began to write about it. Right. And then I realized, oh, you know, I guess this is interesting to me.
I know that a writer, that a novelist rarely bases a character on one real person, but instead borrows from
Yeah,
this person
yeah.
and that person and this person, and to
Yeah.
make a composite person
Exactly.
who does that.
Right.
But I also know that it doesn't, that if you're going to write a novel, that's a lot of time and a lot of mess.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
good heavens,
and
it's
you're
a lot
going
of
to, you know,
mess.
it's going to have to be
Yeah.
something that you're really
Yeah,
interested in
exactly.
grappling
That's right.
with.
You're exactly right.
So-
I have to be completely invested.
Right.
Yeah.
And so your relationship with your mother, was that something that you felt? I had a difficult relationship with my
Yeah.
mother, and
Yeah.
so I kind of, you know,
Yeah.
identified
Right,
in a
right.
great, large
I had
way.
a complicated relationship. I think complicated is
It's a
how I
better
would
word.
put, well, that's
Yeah.
how I'd put it. For my relationship with my mother, it just was complicated for quite some time. It felt like, but you know, in different ways. And she's not Olive, and she's not
Right.
Isabel,
Right.
and she's certainly not Lucy's mother. But because I honestly, I don't really know my mother well enough to write her story, you see. So I mean, Olive is, I guess that says Olive's partly me, which she of course would be,
Right.
because all of my characters,
Sure.
whether they're men or women or children,
Right.
the kernel is always starting from myself, because I'm the only person
That you know.
that I know,
Right.
if I even know that.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know.
right.
So, but I did grow up with a bunch of elderly relatives. They were women, mostly women relatives, great aunts on the same road.
Oh.
And I think their voices were a music in my youth that came through in Olive somewhat. They were not really Olive's. You
Right,
know, Olive has
right.
a lot more spunk and
Right. Yeah.
you know than
Yeah.
they did. But I think there's again that tonal thing or something, you know, that happened.
In Amy, it just has always struck me that you're never afraid of having characters in your books who are really not nice people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm thinking specifically of the teacher in Amy and Isabel. And I have to say, if people have not read Amy and Isabel, that's a novel that is really, really, it's just a wonderful novel.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I feel like maybe it's, you know, forgotten now or something.
Oh,
but,
I hope
you know,
not.
I hope
Over
not.
my dead body.
Yeah, thank you. I hope not too, because yeah, it was,
but that teacher,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
math teacher,
Yep.
was a
Yeah,
real piece
Mr.
of work.
Robertson.
Yes.
He was, and you know, for the most part, I really love all the characters that I write. So I understood him. I had to figure him out in a way that he's not necessarily shown on the page. And just little drops of things like his mother was an alcoholic and this and that. And I made sure that Amy kissed him first.
Yeah.
You know, little
Right.
tiny things that never excused his behavior, my
Right.
goodness. But I sort of understood him a little bit, and his behavior is despicable. You know.
Are you
So-
a question from left field, sort of? But based on that, are you a fan of Lolita, of the book?
I loved Lolita.
You loved Lolita?
I loved that book. Oh my goodness, I
How
can
did
remember.
I know that?
I was really young when I read that for the first time. I wept. Oh my gosh, I loved that book. I did. I love it.
Because Mr. Robertson, you know, is
That's
not,
interesting.
is not
It's so interesting.
unlike.
It's so interesting that you're asking that, because just the other day I was thinking about Lolita, and my daughter had, whatever, there was some mother, a friend or something, and she just couldn't bear that book. And I remember, just recently I was thinking that, and I thought, oh, I love that book. It's a love story.
And you
know.
have to think that Nabokov understood where Humbert was coming from.
I did. That's interesting. That's a very good question. I loved it. Loved it.
So you grew up as a reader?
I did. I did grow up as a reader, and I don't really remember reading children's books. I think my father read me Beatrix Potter. I think I have a memory of that, but I read grown-up books because that's what was around. And I read Pigeon Feathers when I was really,
Oh, the John
really
Updike.
young. Yeah, John Updike's
Wow.
collection of short stories. And that was like one of my first books, really young. And it was so interesting because, I didn't fully understand it, of course, at all. But,
Right.
but it was so thrilling to me because I had that sense like, oh, grown-ups have a whole world out there. Wow, this is, being a kid, this isn't where it's happening.
Right. This is no Beatrix Potter.
No, this is not,
Squirrel Nutkin.
no, exactly. And so, and then I read To Kill a Mockingbird, which came out when I was young. I was, I think, in 3rd grade when I read that. I heard my mother telling my father about it, and I said, oh, can I read it? And I read Hemingway. My grandfather apparently had a salesman, had come by and sold him all of Hemingway's works in these little blue covers. And I went right through those at a young age. I just loved those and Lily, I was reading.
You're drawn especially to character-driven fiction?
Yes, because people, I just am so interested in people. That's really it.
Yeah. I mean, I find myself sitting in restaurants and trying to overhear what people are saying. Do you do that too?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you? I mean, what is more fun? Well, I mean, some things are more fun, but really,
oh, yeah.
it's just, and I was just saying the other day that cell phones, people complain about cell phones. I think they're wonderful. I love hearing half a conversation. I love it, on the buses in New York, back and forth. I guess, it's great fun.
When you're writing, do you read fiction?
I do. I would have to because it takes me so long to write a book that, if I stopped, then I wouldn't be reading. Yeah, I do. I read. I'm careful about what I read only in the sense of it. I need to be reading good sentences.
Yes.
So but I'm always careful about that. So that's, it's like eating good food, which I don't always do, but but I do need to be reading good sentences.
So I know that I've talked to some writers who talk about that they don't want other writers' voices getting in their heads.
Yeah.
But that's not an issue.
No, I don't feel that that's ever been an issue. That I'm aware of.
So I know you edited the Best American Short.
Right.
So did you write short stories at one time?
I did. I wrote short stories for years. I sort of learned the craft of writing in a way, writing short stories. From probably the age of 16 till 30 or 35, I would be writing short stories, and I love short stories, and it was the time of short stories at that time too. They were very popular. Do
you want to go back to it and do?
I'm always interested in stories. I'll write a story once in a while, and I still, I'm still interested in stories. Yeah, very much actually.
Because I wonder whether you would feel that they were too constraining now.
I think again it depends on what it is I'm trying to say. If there's, because the form is the story, and so obviously the Burgess Boys couldn't be a short story, even remotely. And yet if there's an episodic thing that I'm trying to capture, then I'm interested in doing it as a story.
And actually, Olive Kitteridge, we talk about it as a novel, but it's a collection of linked stories.
And I knew immediately, I don't know how I knew, but I'm so glad I did. I just understood, after I wrote the first Olive story, I understood, I thought, okay, great, I'm going to write a book, and they're going to be called the Olive Stories. And I understood that it would be Olive's story, but it would be told in stories.
Well,
and that was very helpful. I'm sure that took a few years off the process of trying to figure out how to get this done.
I mean, I read almost exclusively character-driven fiction, and character-driven fiction that's wonderfully written. That's what I love. And I always say that an easy way to tell if a book is character-driven is to look on the shelf for books that have the character's name in the title, which is a wonderful hint.
Exactly.
and
exactly.
and that makes your books like
yeah,
stand out.
It's true. It's exactly true. I mean, even Abide With Me really should have been called The Tale of Tyler Caskey. I always think of that. I think, why did I let that go? But
that was an option that you didn't feel that you could.
I can't remember what happened with that title, but it really should have been The Tale of Tyler Caskey, because it's a tale.
Right. And
that's
So you're on a book tour now?
Yes.
And so
yes.
what are you reading?
Oh, what am I reading? Well, I just got done reading, what's it called? It was called Stranger Among Friends, Spy Among Friends. It was about Kim Philby.
Oh, yeah.
That book about Kim Philby. I gave it to my husband for Christmas, and he liked it so much, so I read it. Yeah. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
So that was different for me. And right before that, I read a biography of Arthur Miller, because I just thought one day, I'd like to know more about Arthur Miller. So I got a biography and I read that, and it was really quite good.
Do you ever see yourself writing a book, let's see, with a famous, we've seen so many books with famous people.
Fictionalized. Yeah,
Does that interest you at all?
It does not seem to, no.
See, it doesn't interest me as a reader either.
Exactly. Isn't that interesting?
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Although I will say that Stuart O'Nan wrote.
Oh yeah.
Oh my word, that was a beautiful book. I thought. West.
Oh yes.
West of Sunset.
West of Sunset.
West of Sunset.
Stuart O'Nan.
But he's an
your
amazing,
kind of writer.
He's a wonderful writer.
Yes.
And I did love that book. I loved that very, very much. And but ordinarily I'm not drawn to that either as a writer or necessarily as a reader. No.
Stuart, the book that I thought the book of Stuart O'Nan's that I loved was about the elderly woman in
Emily Alone.
Which I thought
perfect. Just perfect.
hung the moon for me.
Just perfect. And then The Night of the Red Lobster.
Oh yeah.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about working in restaurants.
And yeah, right.
Oh my word!
When I interviewed him, he talked a lot about, just as you have, about how voice and character and all of that.
Yeah.
So I figured you must. He is absolutely. Well, Liz, it's just been an absolute delight to
it's been
to
awfully
talk
fun
to
to talk to you. It's been so fun. Thank you.
I hope the next time you're in Seattle, we can do it again.
Yeah,
Continue.
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really wonderful. Thank you.